Growing up, I thought I knew exactly who I was supposed to be. Until I realized my entire life had been planned by someone else. Every choice, every dream, every passion dismissed. What happens when you finally break free from a path that wasn't yours, and the people who shaped your life try to pull you back in? I 34F. Grew up in what most people from the outside would probably call a perfect family. My parents were respected in our town, educated, strict, and with very clear ideas of what a successful life should look like. From as early as I can remember, they had a plan for me. Top grades, a prestigious degree, a stable profession. Sounds nice in theory, right? Except living inside that plan was suffocating. Every step of my childhood was measured, evaluated, judged. If I got a B instead of an A, I wasn't just a child who made a mistake. I was lazy, ungrateful, and in need of discipline. Their discipline usually meant cold silence, endless lectures, or punishments that left me crying myself to sleep. Meanwhile, I had a side of me they didn't understand at all. I loved making things. DIY crafts, little design projects, decorations from scraps. It was the only thing that brought me joy. But whenever my parents caught me at it, they dismissed it with disgust. Art isn't a profession. Stop wasting your time. I learned quickly to hide that part of myself. Looking back, I realized this was the very first crack in our relationship. They didn't want me, they wanted a version of me they could brag about. And no matter how hard I tried, I never felt like I was enough. My earliest school memories aren't of friends or playgrounds. They're of test papers and my parents' faces tightening when the grade wasn't perfect. I was that kid who stayed in during recess to finish extra assignments, not because I wanted to, but because failure simply wasn't an option in my house. If I brought home a bad grade, the reaction was instant and brutal. Sometimes it was hours of being lectured until I cried myself into exhaustion. Other times it was punishments that felt endless, being grounded, having my favorite books or little crafts thrown away, or even being forced to copy entire textbooks until I understood. The message was always the same. Love is conditional, and you'll only earn it through achievement. At the same time, I discovered my creative streak. I could turn an empty box into a dollhouse or make decorations out of paper scraps. Those moments lit me up inside. But every time my parents caught me, they'd sneer. This is worthless. Do something useful. Do you think you'll feed yourself with this nonsense? The strange part is, I started to believe them. Slowly, a part of me began to die. I stopped showing anyone the things I made, stopped talking about what I loved. On the outside, I was the obedient daughter. On the inside, I was a kid who felt like a mistake. By the time I hit my teenage years, the pressure had turned into a full-blown battle. My parents weren't just strict anymore. They were controlling every aspect of my life. Friends? Only the ones they approved of, which meant almost none. Hobbies? Forget it. My entire schedule was tutors, extra classes, and endless study sessions. High school is supposed to be awkward but exciting, right? For me, it felt like a prison sentence. While other kids went to parties or even just hung out after school, I went home to practice equations or write essays for subjects I didn't care about. I had no voice, no autonomy, and no freedom. The worst part was the constant comparison. Look at your cousin, she's already preparing for law school. Or, you think doodling in notebooks will get you anywhere? Focus on chemistry, that's what matters. Every word was like a reminder that who I really was didn't matter. Of course, I rebelled in small, hidden ways. I would sneak into my room at night and sketch designs in the margins of my homework. I made little crafts out of leftover school supplies, then hid them at the bottom of drawers. Those stolen moments were my only breath of oxygen. But even those small acts of defiance came with fear. I lived in constant anxiety that my parents would find out. And sometimes they did. Each discovery was followed by either ridicule or punishment. I started to count the days until graduation because in my mind, that was the only possible escape. When graduation came, I didn't get to choose my future. My parents had already decided for me. I would study economics. According to them, it was prestigious, stable, and respectable. To me, it was suffocating. Numbers and theories didn't excite me, design, colors, shapes, and ideas did. But none of that mattered. My opinions were brushed aside like dust. College was just an extension of my childhood, except with even less freedom. My parents funded everything but kept control over every move. They monitored my grades obsessively, demanded updates after every exam, and if I ever hinted at being unhappy, They shut me down immediately. "We're doing this for your future. You'll thank us later." The irony? Even with the tutors, the long nights, and the pressure, I was only an average student. I worked myself sick for results that weren't even spectacular. Every time I got a grade lower than expected, I'd brace myself for the storm of phone calls and disappointed sighs. Meanwhile, I watched other students live the life I wanted. Some studied art, fashion, or design. I'd see their projects pinned on walls or hear about their exhibitions, and I'd feel this ache inside me, like watching someone live the life I'd been denied. I wanted so badly to be one of them, but instead I was trapped grinding away at something I didn't love. I did graduate though. On paper it was an achievement. My parents were proud, bragged to their friends, and smiled in family photos. But inside I felt empty. The diploma wasn't mine, it was theirs. After graduation, I landed a job in the field my parents had pushed me into. It wasn't glamorous. It was a mid-level office position with mediocre pay and endless spreadsheets. My parents, of course, treated it like I joined the ranks of the elite. "See? We told you. Respectable. Secure. You'll thank us when you're older." The truth? I hated every second of it. The fluorescent lights, the lifeless tasks, the suffocating routine. It all made me feel like I was shrinking inside my own skin. But there was one upside. I finally earned my own paycheck. Even though it wasn't much, I started saving every spare bit of it. My dream wasn't to climb the corporate ladder. It was to get out. After about a year, I scraped together enough to rent a tiny apartment. It wasn't fancy. Just a cramped space with peeling wallpaper and a bathroom that constantly leaked, but it was mine. Moving out was the first real act of rebellion I'd ever made. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without someone hovering over my shoulder. That's when I allowed myself to revisit the part of me I'd buried for so long. In secret, after work, I enrolled in evening courses for design. I didn't tell my parents, they would have shut it down instantly. Instead, I kept it quiet, treating those classes like stolen treasures. And when I started creating again, design projects, handmade pieces, small creative works, I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood: joy. My teachers noticed my originality, classmates asked for my input, and slowly, opportunities began to appear. Recommendations. Small orders. Compliments that felt like sunlight on skin starved of warmth. For the first time in my life, I thought, this is me. This is who I was supposed to be all along. The evening courses turned into the highlight of my day. I dragged myself through the dull 9-to-5 grind, then practically run to class at night, buzzing with excitement. My projects stood out not because they were perfect but because they were different. My instructors praised my originality, and classmates started asking if I could help with their designs. Soon small commissions followed. A friend's friend wanted a custom piece. Then someone else wanted invitations designed. Before long, I was staying up past midnight, balancing spreadsheets by day and creating by night. It was exhausting, but for once in my life I didn't resent the exhaustion. It felt like proof that I was alive. Of course, I kept it hidden from my parents. In their minds, I was climbing the ladder of my respectable career. I didn't dare tell them the truth, not when I remembered the way they used to sneer at my childhood crafts. But life has a way of exposing secrets. It happened when a family acquaintance stumbled across one of my designs online and innocently mentioned it to my mother. The phone call I got that night was volcanic. "What is this nonsense we're hearing about you playing with arts and crafts? Do you think wasting time like this will pay your bills? We didn't sacrifice for you to throw away your degree." For years I had hidden my creative soul in silence. But this time, something inside me didn't shrink. Instead, I felt steady, calm. I told them it was my passion, that I was good at it, that it made me happy. The silence on the other end of the phone was worse than any yelling. Then came my father's voice. Cold, sharp, final. "If you walk down this path, don't expect us to support you anymore. Don't even expect us to call you our daughter." And just like that, the line went dead. That phone call changed everything. I remember sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. My parents had been controlling, harsh, even cruel at times, but deep down I always believed they'd still see me as their daughter no matter what. Hearing my father say otherwise felt like a knife twisting in my chest. First I was numb. Then came the anger. How could they dismiss me so easily after all those years of sacrifice, of obeying their every command, of molding myself into the daughter they wanted. Was I really just a trophy to them, useful only if I followed their script? The days that followed were brutal. Calls and texts turned into ultimatums, then silence. Relatives reached out, telling me I was breaking my parents' hearts. A cousin sent me a message. Why don't you just do what they want? You know they only want the best for you. I wanted to scream. If this was their version of the best, why did it feel like slow suffocation? And yet, under all that pain, something new stirred. For the first time in my life, the chains were broken. Yes, it hurt to lose their approval, but I also realized I was finally free to chase the life I wanted without waiting for their permission. So I made a decision. If they were going to disown me, then fine, I'd build a life so strong, so unapologetically mine that I'd never have to crawl back. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. Once the bridge with my parents burned, I threw myself completely into my work. The office job was still there, but more and more, my creative projects became my real career. I stayed up late, worked weekends, poured every ounce of myself into designs that finally felt alive. And it paid off. Slowly at first, small commissions, local clients, word of mouth. Then bigger ones. Companies asking for branding, couples hiring me for weddings, even online orders that stretched across the country. My inbox started filling up with opportunities I'd only dreamed about. The day I realized my creative income had surpassed my respectable job salary, I sat on my couch and cried. Not because of the money itself, but because it proved my parents wrong. All those years of hearing, "You can't make a living from this nonsense." And here I was finally supporting myself through the very thing they despised. Eventually, I quit the office job. Walking out of that building for the last time felt like shedding a skin I'd never wanted to wear. I was free financially and emotionally, in a way I'd never experienced before. But freedom has its costs. My parents were outraged when they heard. They bombarded me with calls and emails, first begging me to come to my senses, then threatening to cut me off completely from the family. When I didn't bend, the silence came again, thicker, colder this time. And yet, as painful as it was, I felt relief. For the first time, I wasn't living for them. I was living for me. Once the storm with my parents finally went quiet, I began to truly live. It was strange at first, like learning how to breathe again after years underwater. For so long, every choice I made was filtered through their expectations. Without that weight, the world felt wide open. I started with small things. I bought clothes I actually liked. Bright colors, bold patterns, things my mother would have called childish. I decorated my apartment with my own designs, pieces that reflected me. I traveled for the first time, taking cheap flights to places I'd only ever seen in pictures. Walking through streets where nobody knew me, I felt untouchable. Free in a way I never thought possible. Work flourished too. Clients returned, new ones appeared, and my calendar filled months in advance. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The money was good, better than I'd ever earned at the office job, but more importantly, I felt joy in every project. I woke up excited instead of dreading the day. Of course, my parents were nowhere in this life. Holidays passed in silence. Birthdays came and went without a single message. It hurt sometimes. There were nights when I wondered if I should reach out, if I should try to mend the gap. But then I remembered the contempt in my father's voice, the years of scorn, the way they disowned me without hesitation. I told myself, you can miss what you deserved without missing the people who denied it to you. And so I kept moving forward. It had been years since I'd heard from them. I'd long since stopped waiting for birthdays or holidays to bring a reconciliation. So when my phone lit up one evening with my mother's name, my stomach dropped. For a second, I considered not answering. But curiosity, or maybe old wounds, made me swipe accept. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. Careful. Almost fragile. She didn't start with apologies or warmth. Instead, she went straight to business. Their company had fallen on hard times, and the stress had wrecked my father's health. He'd had a minor heart scare, and the bills were piling up. Then came the request. We need your help. You're doing well now, aren't you? The words hit me like a slap. After years of silence, years of disdain, the first thing they wanted from me was money. Not a, how are you? Not a, we miss you. Just, we need what you built without us. I sat frozen, torn between fury and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, To tell her she had no right to ask me for anything after the years of control, rejection, and abandonment. Another part of me, still that wounded child desperate for her parents' love, hesitated. Her voice cracked when she added, "Please, he's not well. I don't know what else to do." And suddenly, I was 13 again, craving approval, terrified of their disappointment, but also a woman in her 30s who had finally built a life on her own terms. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just whispered, "I'll think about it." And then I hung up, heart racing, unsure whether I wanted to cry or scream. For days after that call, I couldn't think straight. My mind replayed every insult, every punishment, every moment of my childhood and adolescence where I had felt invisible or worthless. Part of me screamed, "Let them suffer. Let them face the consequences of their own mistakes. They don't deserve your help." Yet another part of me, the part one had spent years nurturing in secret, felt a strange pull of responsibility. Despite everything, they were still my parents. Despite the years of pain, I remembered fleeting moments of care, fleeting glimmers of the family I never truly had. Could I really turn my back on a father in poor health? I paced my apartment, heart hammering, weighing old wounds against new empathy. The anger was raw, the betrayal deep, and yet I kept imagining what it would feel like if I refused. Would it give me the satisfaction of revenge, or would it leave me hollow knowing I could have helped? Finally, I made a decision. I would help, but on my terms. I wouldn't allow them to shame me or dictate my life. I wouldn't allow the past to control the present. I would help because I wanted to, not because they demanded it. When I told my mother I'd come, her relief was audible even over the phone. And for the first time in decades, I felt a strange sense of control, not over them but over myself and the choices I made. I arrived at their house with my heart pounding. It felt surreal, like stepping into a past I thought I had left behind. My father looked older, frilier than I remembered, and my mother's eyes were red from worry. The house itself had lost some of its polished perfection. The weight of their struggles was visible everywhere. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I helped manage their finances, contacted clients, negotiated some urgent deals, and even lent them a portion of the money I'd saved. The process was strange. Power had shifted. I was no longer the obedient daughter. I was the one keeping them afloat. Throughout it, my parents were silent at first, then gradually their walls began to crack. They spoke with humility I'd never heard before. My mother whispered apologies, half in shame, half in fear. We were wrong. We pushed you too hard. We never meant to hurt you like that." My father nodded silently, his eyes glossy. For a fleeting moment I felt a pang of hope. Maybe finally they understood. Maybe the apology was genuine. Maybe things could be different this time. But as the days passed, I realized something important. Apologies could never erase years of control, disdain, and emotional pain. The wounds ran too deep. Even as I helped them, a storm of emotions raged inside me. I wanted to forgive. I wanted to believe that their remorse was genuine, that the years of harshness could be washed away. But every memory of my childhood, every punishment, every insult, every day I spent hiding who I truly was, surfaced with brutal clarity. I realized forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It wasn't about whether they said sorry or whether they needed me. It was about what I could accept for myself. And right now, accepting them fully felt impossible. My heart still ached with the ghost of a daughter they had never truly loved. At the same time, I didn't want to close the door completely. I helped, I listened, I supported them. But I drew boundaries. I refused to let them control me, to shame me, or to dictate my life. They could apologize all they wanted, but trust, love, and complete reconciliation would take more than words. And so we existed in a fragile truce. A cautious coexistence. One where I had the power to choose the terms and pace of any interaction. For the first time in my life, I was in control. Months later, just as I was settling back into my independent life, my mother called again. This time the tone was different. Less pleading, more hopeful. She asked if I would join them for a family dinner for the holidays. My first instinct was to refuse. The memories of years spent under their control were sharp, and the thought of pretending everything was normal made my stomach twist. But curiosity and a flicker of old attachment made me hesitate. Maybe I wanted to see them to gauge whether they had truly changed, or perhaps secretly I wanted to feel the power of saying no and watching them respect it. When I arrived at the dinner, the air was thick with unspoken tension. They smiled, made polite conversation, and occasionally offered small apologies. I could see the regret in their eyes, but I also knew that a single dinner couldn't undo decades of pain. Throughout the evening, I remained careful, engaging but guarded. I laughed when appropriate, complimented the food, and even shared a little about my own life. But the truth was, I had built a life that didn't depend on their approval. I was free, and that freedom was worth more than any holiday truce. By the end of the night, I realized something crucial. I could be gracious without surrendering my boundaries. I could acknowledge their effort to reconnect without erasing my own journey. Sitting alone that night after the dinner, I let myself reflect. The path I'd taken was painful, messy, and full of conflict, but it had led me to something I never thought I'd have. A life that was truly mine. I had creativity, financial independence, and, most importantly, control over my own choices. My parents had learned, slowly and painfully, that imposing their will and disregarding my passions had consequences. They'd realized their mistakes, but the past couldn't be erased. And I had learned that love without respect isn't love at all. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding your own limits and protecting yourself. If I could give advice to anyone in a similar situation, it would be this: your dreams and passions are valid. Pursue them, even if the people closest to you don't understand. Set boundaries, reclaim your voice, and remember that approval from those who cannot respect your individuality is not necessary for your happiness. I still care for my parents in my own way, but I no longer live to meet their expectations. I live for me, and for the first time in my life, that's more than enough.